You're getting too old for this big house anyway. Why don't you just move into a senior's home and let us take over?" The words hit me like a slap across the face. I stood there in the doorway of my own kitchen, watching my son-in-law Kyle lean back in my chair, his feet propped up on my dining table, smirking at me like he'd just made the most reasonable suggestion in the world. I'd lived in this house for 32 years. My late wife Catherine and I had picked out every light fixture, planted every tree in the backyard, repainted the walls 3 times as our tastes changed. This was where we'd raised our daughter Sarah, where Catherine had taken her last breath 5 years ago, surrounded by photos of our life together. And now this man, this 32-year-old who couldn't hold down a job to save his life, was telling me to leave. I should back up. Let me tell you how I ended up here. My name is Richard Thornton. I'm 65 years old, a retired high school English teacher from Vancouver. I spent 40 years teaching teenagers about Shakespeare and Steinbeck, and I'd like to think I was pretty good at it. When I retired 3 years ago, I was looking forward to a quiet life, volunteering, reading, maybe traveling a bit. Catherine and I had planned to see the Maritimes together, but cancer had other plans. After she passed, the house felt too quiet. Too many memories in every corner. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. Sarah would visit sometimes, but she had her own life. She'd married Kyle 2 years ago, and I'll be honest, I never liked him much. There was something about the way he talked, always name-dropping, always working on some big opportunity that never seemed to materialize. But Sarah loved him, and that was enough for me to keep my mouth shut. Until 18 months ago, when they showed up at my door with suitcases. "Dad, we need a favor," Sarah had said, her eyes red from crying. "Kyle's startup didn't work out, and we had to give up our apartment. Could we stay with you, just for 3 months? Until we get back on our feet?" What was I supposed to say? She's my daughter, my only child. Of course, I said yes. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into 12. Now here we were, a year and a half later, and they'd taken over my life. It started small. Kyle's clothes appearing in my laundry. His car in the garage, while mine sat in the driveway. His friends coming over for poker night without asking. Sarah worked 2 jobs, one at a dental office, another serving at a restaurant, while Kyle networked and worked on his business ventures. Those business ventures mostly involved sitting on my couch, scrolling through his phone, and attending expensive investment seminars that I later found out I'd paid for through my credit card. He'd taken it from my wallet one day, claiming he needed to buy groceries. The groceries never appeared, but a $1,200 charge from Crypto Success Summit did. I tried to talk to Sarah about it. She'd just get defensive. "Dad, Kyle's working really hard. These things take time. You don't understand how business works in the modern world." Maybe I didn't. But I understood that a grown man shouldn't be living rent-free in someone else's home while his wife worked herself to exhaustion. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd been feeling off for a few days, chest tight, short of breath. I figured it was just stress, or maybe I was coming down with something. But that morning, the pain got worse, sharp, radiating down my left arm. I recognized the symptoms from the first aid courses I'd taken during my teaching career. Heart attack. I stumbled out of my bedroom, clutching my chest. Kyle was in the living room, headphones on, playing video games. "Kyle," I gasped. "I need hospital. I think heart attack." He glanced over, pulled one headphone off. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of a raid." I stared at him, unable to process what I'd just heard. "Kyle, hospital, now." He sighed, paused his game. "Fine, but you're going to have to call an Uber or something. I've got an important meeting at 11 I can't miss." I managed to dial 911 myself. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, Kyle was back at his game, completely absorbed. At the hospital, after they'd stabilized me and confirmed it was a mild cardiac event, stress-induced, thankfully not a full heart attack, a nurse came to check on me. "Is your family here?" she asked. "No," I said. "My son-in-law had an important meeting." She gave me a look that said everything. It was the same look I'd seen in the mirror every morning for the past 18 months. The next visitor I had wasn't family at all. It was Margaret Chen, I'd met Margaret 6 months earlier at the Vancouver Public Library where I'd started volunteering. She ran the community programs, book clubs, ESL classes, children's story time. She was 62, a widow herself, with kind eyes and a sharp wit that reminded me a bit of Catherine. We'd become friends, grabbing coffee after our volunteer shifts, talking about books and life. She'd brought flowers and a stack of mysteries she knew I liked. "Richard, what happened?" she asked, settling into the chair beside my bed. I told her everything. The chest pain, calling 911 myself, Kyle's reaction, or lack of reaction. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "Why do you let them treat you this way?" I opened my mouth to defend Sarah, to make excuses, but nothing came out. Because she was right. I had been letting them treat me this way. For 18 months, I'd been the backup plan, the safety net, the free hotel. "I don't know," I finally said. "You deserve better than this," Margaret said gently. "You're a good man, Richard. A good father. But being a good father doesn't mean being a doormat." I thought about her words all night. By morning, I'd made a decision. When Sarah finally showed up, Kyle still hadn't bothered to visit. I told her I was setting a new boundary. "Honey, you and Kyle need to find your own place. 30 days. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, we can't afford." "Then Kyle needs to get a job. A real job. I've been more than patient, but this arrangement isn't working anymore." "Is this because Kyle didn't drive you?" "Dad," he explained that to me. "The meeting was really important, and you seemed fine." "Sarah." I kept my voice firm. 30 days. She left crying. I felt terrible, but also a lighter. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying too long. That evening, Kyle came to my room. He didn't knock. "We need to talk about this whole eviction thing," he said, arms crossed. "There's nothing to discuss. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." He laughed. Actually laughed. "You really don't get it, do you, old man?" The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench. "This house is Sarah's inheritance anyway," he continued. "You're just keeping it warm until you kick the bucket, which, given what happened yesterday, might be sooner than you think. So why don't you just make this easy on everyone? You're getting too old for this big house anyway. Move into a senior's home, let us take over, and we'll make sure you're comfortable in whatever nursing home you end up in." That's when he said it. The words I started this story with. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him for what he was, a parasite. Someone who'd latched onto my daughter and, by extension, onto me, sucking us dry while contributing nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just said, "Get out of my room." "Whatever," he smirked. "You've got a month to come to your senses. When you do, we can talk about making this transition smooth." He left. I sat on my bed, hands shaking, not from fear or weakness, but from clarity. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. First, to a real estate agent I knew from the neighborhood. "Susan, I need you to list my house, quietly. No sign in the yard yet. I want it on the market, but I don't want anyone at home to know." Second, to a lawyer. "I need to update my will. Immediately." Third, to a moving and storage company. "I need to move some items out of my house. Personal belongings, family heirlooms. Without anyone noticing." Over the next 2 weeks, I worked methodically. While Kyle slept until noon and Sarah was at work, I had movers come and pack up everything that mattered. Catherine's jewelry, our photo albums, my grandfather's war medals, the antique furniture we'd inherited from her parents, our wedding china. Everything with sentimental or monetary value went into a climate-controlled storage unit across town. I photographed every room for my records, documented what I'd paid in utilities, groceries, and household expenses for the past 18 months. It came to $47,000. I made spreadsheets, saved receipts. Susan worked fast. The Vancouver market was hot, it always is, and within a week, I had 3 offers. I accepted one from a young family, cash buyers, who could close in 2 weeks. At the lawyer's office, I made careful changes to my will. The house sale proceeds would go into a trust for Sarah. She'd get monthly payments, but Kyle couldn't touch the principal. The rest of my estate, my pension, savings, investments, would be split between several charities and Margaret, who'd become such a dear friend. Are you sure about this? My lawyer asked. It's quite a drastic change. I've never been more sure of anything. Everything fell into place with frightening efficiency. The 30 days I'd given them came and went. Kyle and Sarah hadn't even started looking for apartments. Why would they? Kyle was confident I'd cave. On day 31, I had movers scheduled to arrive at 9 in the morning. I woke up at 6, made myself a coffee, and waited. Kyle stumbled out of the master bedroom. Yes, the master bedroom. He'd moved into it 6 months ago, claiming the guest room was too small around 10:30. What's all that noise? He grumbled. I looked up from my coffee. Moving trucks. Moving trucks? Did you finally come to your senses and decide to... He stopped as he looked out the window and saw 3 burly men loading furniture into a truck. What the hell is going on? I'm moving, I said calmly. Moving? Moving where? You said we had to move, not you. I changed my mind. You were right, Kyle. I am too old for this big house. I watched his face transform from confusion to triumph. He actually smiled. Well, it's about time you listen to reason. I'll need to set up some utilities in my name, and we should probably talk about... The house sold 2 weeks ago, I interrupted. The new owners take possession today. The color drained from his face. What? You said this house was Sarah's inheritance anyway. You said I was just keeping it warm. Well, I decided you were right. The house was too much for someone my age, so I sold it. You can't. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore. You had 30 days to figure that out. You chose not to. Sarah appeared in the hallway, still in her pajamas. Dad, what's happening? This was the hardest part. Looking at my daughter's confused, hurt face. I sold the house. Honey, I gave you both 30 days to find a place. That deadline passed yesterday, but I thought... Kyle said you didn't really mean it. Kyle was wrong. I pulled an envelope from my pocket. Here's $5,000. That should cover first and last month's rent somewhere. But that's all I can do. $5,000? Kyle exploded. This house is worth over $1 million. You're stealing Sarah's inheritance. Inheritance? I stood up, and despite being a foot shorter than Kyle, I felt taller than I had in months. You have to die for someone to inherit, Kyle. And despite your apparent wishes, I'm not dead. This was my house. Mine and Catherine's. We bought it. We paid for it. Sarah has no legal claim to it. You're a selfish old man, Kyle spat. You're screwing over your own daughter. No, I'm setting her free, whether she realizes it or not. I turned to Sarah. Honey, you're in the will. There's a trust set up for you. You'll be taken care of. But Kyle won't be able to touch it. What about me? Kyle's voice had gone from angry to panicked. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Kyle. Maybe you could get a job. Try Tim Hortons. They're always hiring. His face went purple. You spiteful. Careful, I warned. You're currently trespassing in someone else's home. The new owners have been very patient, but they're willing to call the police if necessary. The movers worked around us, professional and efficient. They'd done this before awkward family situations during moves. Sarah stood frozen, torn between her loyalty to Kyle and the reality unfolding in front of her. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Dad, she said quietly. Did Kyle really not take you to the hospital? I met her eyes. He said his raid was more important. Something shifted in her face. I'd seen that expression before when she was 7 and realized the tooth fairy wasn't real. The moment a comfortable illusion shatters. Get your things, I told them both. You have 2 hours before the new owners arrive. The next 2 hours were chaos. Kyle ranted and threatened. He called his friends, his family, looking for someone to tell him he was right, that I was the monster here. Sarah moved through the house like a ghost, packing slowly, crying quietly. At exactly noon, the new owners arrived, Mark and Jennifer, with their 2 kids, excited about their new home. Their joy was palpable, infectious. This house would have life in it again. Laughter. Love. Kyle and Sarah loaded the last of their belongings into their car. I handed Sarah the envelope with the check. I love you, I told her. This isn't about punishing you. It's about stopping the enabling. You deserve better than this. Better than him." She didn't answer, just got in the car. As they drove away, Kyle still yelling out the window about lawyers and revenge, I felt nothing but relief. Margaret picked me up an hour later. I'd rented a modest 2-bedroom condo in Kitsilano, near the beach. The movers had already delivered my belongings from storage. "How do you feel?" she asked, as we drove away from the house I'd lived in for 3 decades. "Free," I said, and meant it. The next few months were transformative. Sarah called me 2 weeks later. She'd left Kyle. "I'm staying with a friend," she said. "I got my own apartment. Small, but it's mine." "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't see what he was doing, what I was letting him do to you." "You're young," I said. "We all make mistakes." He showed me who he really was when the money was gone. When he couldn't use you anymore, he had no use for me either. We talked for 3 hours that night. Really talked, like we hadn't in years. I helped her with the damage deposit on her apartment from my own pocket, not the trust. She needed to know I still believed in her. She started therapy, got promoted at the dental office, began rebuilding her life. Kyle tried to contest the will, claiming I was mentally incompetent when I changed it. The lawyer made quick work of that. I had medical records showing I was perfectly sound, and witnesses to Kyle's behavior. As for Margaret and me, we took things slowly. Coffee dates became dinner dates, walks along English Bay. She introduced me to her grown sons, who lived in Toronto. I introduced her to Sarah. One evening in September, 6 months after I'd sold the house, Margaret and I were planting herbs in containers on my condo balcony. The sunset was painting the sky over the North Shore Mountains in shades of orange and pink. "You know what I realized?" I said, pressing basil seeds into the soil. Giving Sarah everything didn't help her. It hurt her. It taught her she didn't have to stand on her own, that someone would always be there to catch her. "And now?" Margaret asked. "Now she's standing. Wobbly sometimes, but standing. And she's stronger for it." Margaret smiled, dirt under her fingernails, hair falling out of its clip. She looked beautiful. "You did the right thing," she said. "I did the necessary thing. There's a difference." That night, I slept better than I had in years. No footsteps overhead. No Kyle's friends' loud voices at midnight. No stress about what I'd find missing from my wallet. Just peace. Sarah came over for Thanksgiving dinner that year. Just the 3 of us, her, Margaret, and me. We roasted a chicken, made terrible pumpkin pie from scratch, laughed until our sides hurt. "To new beginnings," Sarah raised her glass. "To learning when to let go," I added. "To finding your people," Margaret finished. We drank, and I realized this small gathering, this chosen family was worth more than any house, any amount of money, any obligation to blood ties that brought nothing but pain. I ran into a former colleague a few weeks later at the supermarket. She'd heard about the house sale, the dramatic exit, all of it. Our community wasn't that big. "Richard, I heard what happened. Are you okay? That must have been so difficult." "It was," I admitted, "but necessary." "Do you regret it?" I thought about Kyle's face when he realized his meal ticket was gone, about Sarah's tears, about the house I'd shared with Catherine, now filled with someone else's memories. "Not for a second," I said, and I meant it. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand on their own feet, even if they have to fall a few times first, even if it means watching them struggle, even if it breaks your heart, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is raising an adult who never grows up, who sees the world as something that owes them comfort, who measures love in dollars and square footage instead of presence and respect. I loved my daughter enough to let her fall, and she loved me enough to get back up. As for Kyle, I have no idea where he ended up. Last I heard, he'd moved to Edmonton, chasing another business opportunity. I don't think about him much. I think about Saturday mornings helping Margaret with the library's book sale, about Tuesday dinners with Sarah, where she tells me about her promotion, her new friends, her therapy breakthroughs, about the garden Margaret and I are planning for my balcony next spring, tomatoes, peppers, maybe strawberries if we're ambitious. I think about the community center where I've started teaching creative writing to seniors, about the trip Margaret and I are planning to Nova Scotia next summer, about how my blood pressure has dropped, how I sleep through the night now, how I wake up looking forward to the day instead of dreading it. The house is gone, but I'm still here. And for the first time in years, I'm actually living, not just existing in the spaces between other people's demands. That's worth more than any inheritance, more than any property value, more than the approval of a son-in-law who never really saw me as anything more than a resource to exploit. I'm 65 years old. I'm dating a wonderful woman. My daughter is thriving. I volunteer. I read. I write. I have friends. I have peace. And I learned something important. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to say enough. It's never too late to start over. The house was just wood and brick and memories. I carried the important memories with me. Catherine would have understood. She would have been proud. And on quiet nights, when I'm reading on my balcony with the city lights spread out below me and Margaret humming in the kitchen, I whisper a thank you to that entitled son-in-law who told me I was too old for my own house. Because he was right, in a way he never intended. I was too old for that house. Too old to keep living for other people's comfort at the expense of my own. Too old to keep enabling bad behavior in the name of family obligation. Too old to keep shrinking myself to fit into spaces where I wasn't valued. But I wasn't too old to start over, to fall in love, to set boundaries, to choose peace over obligation. I wasn't too old for a new beginning. And that, I've learned, makes all the difference.